So before we dive into the content today, I just, with a full grateful heart, Tŝilhqot'in, who is the BCAFN Two-Spirit Knowledge Keeper, who is here to do a welcome and opening prayer to start us off in a good way. So over to you, Tŝilhqot'in.
My ancestral name is Simplayan. I come from Musqueam, Squamish. I'm honored to see each and every one of you. I'm going to sing one verse of a song we call Heartbeat. So I'm in a public setting, so I'm going to do my best. Chasiam Kahanas Pahamchit Quaman Tommy Sim to estate the way in safe Nate the way TM Wallerins. Quaman Tommy Sim to watch no me up TM to separate those TM EA Trisha Plan Night Wallerins wait TM. First of all, thanks and asking our creator and ancestors to watch over each and every one of us, especially our respected matriarchs, our chiefs, our kupis, and everyone that's in this room today, asking creator to put a blessing on you so we can have really healthy dialogue and to view the gender-based analysis in this webinar behalf of BCAFN. With that, I say hot 50 months. Those are my words. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your prayer, for your song, for sharing your time with us and opening us in a good way. It's wonderful to have your presence here to support this meeting. And as Tŝilhqot'in said, we are going to be discussing the co-creation of the First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus. So I'm just going to pull up our PowerPoint here. So bear with me. I'm not a techie, so I'm hoping that it's a smooth share here. Just give me a second. There we go. And if somebody can just give me the thumbs up if that they can see it. Okay, perfect. Awesome, wonderful. So again, welcome everybody here. If you'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory that you're calling in from today, please feel free to use the chat to do so, and also maybe take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat as well, as we have a full room, quote unquote virtual room here today. And as I mentioned, my name is Chastity Davis-Alphonse. I'm a mixed heritage woman. I'm from the Tŝilhqot'in Nation on my mother's side and English and Ukrainian on my father's side, and I'm married into the Tŝilhqot'in Nation. And today we also have Dr. Natalie Clark here. Our co-facilitator, Dr. Sarah Hunt, isn't able to be with us today, but we will be reporting out on some of the work that they've done. And we also have some very special guests here today. That was part of the pilot project, the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council. So welcoming the Tŝilhqot'in women here today. I believe we have Carla and Angie and Thelma from the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council, who will be presenting in a little bit on the pilot project that they have completed. And it's still kind of has some legs, and they've breathed lots of life into it. So it will be likely continuing on beyond the end of the pilot, and they've done some good work there. So I'm really excited. So thank you to the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council for making time to be here with us today and to report out on the process. So we also have Rochelle King here, who's the lead on this project from the BC Assembly of First Nations, and she'll be presenting, just talking to some of the process that BCAFN went through to sort of execute this project and make it come to life. And we have Joanna Prince here as well, who is she's our tech support extraordinaire. But she's a woman of many talents too. But I just want to let you know, if you have any technical issues, to please just send Joanna a note, and she'll be happy to support you in any way that she can. Well, I just want to again remind folks that this is being recorded and will be posted on the BCAFN website afterwards, as well as the PowerPoint presentation will be shared there as well for folks to be able to have access to this information after. I don't believe we have any set breaks, and we are going from 1 to 4. So I just want to say to remind folks to really just take care of yourself during this time. If you need to get some water, take a stretch, some food, nourish your heart, body, mind, and soul, please do so. If you also feel like you need some extra support, we have our elder here, and we can likely set up like a breakout room or something if you need to have some one-to-one time. And we also have Natalie here, who specializes in doing that work as well. So just a couple of sort of housekeeping things before we get started. But maybe Natalie, I'll just turn it over to you for you to say hello and do your introduction before we move into the agenda.
Why, everyone, well, you can all hear me okay? Yeah, just so grateful to our knowledge keepers, Samphile, who opened us, to all the knowledge keepers and everyone who's joined us today. My name is Natalie Clark. I'm joining you from Tŝilhqot'in, which is Turtle Valley in beautiful Secwepemcúlecw. I'm learning how to say that. And I acknowledge my settler ancestry and then my particular Secwepemc kinship as mommy, auntie, grandma, and just really accountability in my heart work is here. I do work in Chastity or Nisconlith as the counselor at the school. I run Indigenous Girls Group, which is actually going to an escape room today after this. So I'm taking 15 of them. So that's kind of the heart space that guides me. And I'm always honored to be invited in to do this work. And I see so many people I recognize and love and look forward to knowing others. So yeah, gratitude to everyone for being here today.
Thank you, Natalie, for your introduction and for being willing to be on this journey again with me. And we'll share a little bit about the first journey that we've been on as well together. But I too want to recognize the traditional territory that I'm calling in from today, the beautiful lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, whose land I've had the privilege and honor of living on since 2001. And so just really grateful that I have the opportunity to live on these lands as well. So we also wanted to front with some more acknowledgements, which I think are really important beyond our land acknowledgement, but wanting to acknowledge our relatives as well that have had the opportunity to take part in this journey. So we wish to recognize the Indigenous nations where we're joining from, and also would like to express gratitude to all the First Nations women, men, girls, boys, Two-Spirit, and gender and sexual diverse peoples who participated in the 2023 engagement process. hosted by the BCAFN. The engagement process captured your voices, knowledge, wisdom, and lived experiences will and has informed the creation of a First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus toolkit. And we hope that you will see your recommendations, truth-telling, and lived experiences, and even silences reflected in the report that follows. And so really important for us to take that time to acknowledge, because this was definitely a co-creation.
Isn't it nice?
Yeah. Lots of people together.
So, I mean, you could just pull anything.
To be able to get to where we are today with the First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Toolkit. So just want to ask folks to make sure that you're muted if you're not sharing, so that that you turn your microphone off or mute it, just so that we can make sure that what we're sharing is clear. So the agenda today will roll out with a welcome and land acknowledgement.
Look through the easy books.
And an acknowledgement of participants in the engagement process. I'm going to hand it back over to Natalie to talk about centering wellness. And we'll talk about the importance of inclusive language. What is Gender-Based Analysis Plus? What is Indigenous Gender-Based Analysis Plus? And then really talking about the overview of the toolkit creation. We did already host a What We Heard session after we completed the regional engagement sessions. So we will give a brief overview of what we heard, but the more in-depth session was recorded and is available as well through the BCAFN website. And we can also make sure that if there's any follow-up emails that go out, that you can have access to that session as well. So today is going to be a little bit briefer on that side, but if you are interested in hearing more about what we heard, there is an opportunity to listen to that recording as well. So we'll walk you through a bit of the process of, this over like year-long journey that we've been on here. And as I was saying to Natalie and others, as we come to wrapping this up at the end of March, that it really does feel like just the beginning, even though this portion of the project is wrapping up. There's so much more to be said. There's so much more to reflect on. There's so many more readings that we can do in literature. And there's just like so many more conversations that we can have. And this work really is meant to be a first few steps on the path. And we're really hoping that this work continues to evolve and others pick it up and are able to continue to grow it and work with it. And so that's sort of how we're feeling about as we close this work, this part of the project. So we did an acknowledgement of the participants already, and I just want to hand over to Natalie to just talk about centering wellness and community care.
Hi again to anyone who joined since we did introductions. So just a reminder, as we go through this 3 hours, we forgot to schedule wellness breaks, but please, can you back that up? Thanks. Make sure you take care of yourself. And, I always say go to our body so that it doesn't have to go to us. And just that a reminder that our experiences of harm come to us through, come to us through our senses, smell, sight, touch. And those can be the things that can help bring us back to here and now. So I always talk about, what's in your basket. This is a beautiful Tŝilhqot'in basket made by Jerry and Phyllis Thomas. It's a little one. I have big ones made by Minnie, but I like to keep in my basket something that I can hold and smell. This is sweetgrass mist we had wellness bundles that we gifted to the in-person participants made by Auntie June Reeves or Up the Hill at Tŝilhqot'in. Always have a stone or something to hold on to sort of ground in our strengths. And, something you can taste. I keep dark chocolate close, and I have a beautiful candle burning here as well right now. So just want to acknowledge that policy has been and continues to be the site of harm. And so there hasn't been a session that we've done that didn't have some things that came up and that some hard moments for people. And as we think about the toolkit and it being in the world, you know, it's really important that any session you do of moving this forward, that you center that heart work and that healing work that is necessary. So just consider your own wellness and relationship to that. And, you know, when we think of even that question, like, what's my story of being listened to in policy? And what healing resources can I draw on as I approach this work? So yeah, just a reminder, take care of yourself, keep water close, your Tŝilhqot'in. We had a beautiful prayer and heart song that started us, and that really is the medicine that will keep us well. So yeah, just kind of taking care of each other in wellness and community care. And I can hear my dog squeaking in the background. I am at home and they are very sad that they are left outside. So at some point I might have to just quickly step away or she will not stop squeaking. Oh.
Thank you, Natalie. You want to do this part too?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, it really flows from wellness when we think about the word triggering, or as Elda Norma Emanuel says, invitations to healing. But when we first started doing these processes and we led with maybe the more colonial gender words, you know, GBA plus, there was often strong reactions to even that, or to words and the ways they maybe left people out, and the importance of inclusive language in all our pieces. I actually have something, an affirmation that one of my girls group people wrote. It says, "Who I am is okay and I belong." And that's just a reminder to me that that's what's really guiding this work. So I'm going to share a little bit. Dr. Sarah Hunt, who's a dear friend, but also an important scholar in the area, facilitated the Two-Spirit session. And I'm going to read their words because they're not here to join with us. So some of what Sarah offered is, I mean, this is actually just generally, this is from our perspective, that, you know, GBA plus is a method of analysis that's gained new traction, but the importance of Indigenous intersectional work, and that's existed, we would say here in Secwepemcúla, well used, but forever for millennia within First Nation societies. So we really realize that part of this work is naming, using our languages to name each of the steps in the processes. So we can go to the next slide. This was from Sarah in her analysis from that exclusive session. Sarah offered that it's vital that First Nations GBA Plus involves intersectional approaches which consider both gender and sexual diversity. This includes first understanding the distinct lived experiences, identities, and concerns of gender diverse and sexually diverse members of Indigenous nations. This theme came up actually in all sessions, but in particular in the session Sarah hosted. The importance of education about gender and sexuality will increase the capacity of all community members to make healthy decisions about their own bodies and relationships, as well as understanding the role they can play in embracing members of their family and community who are 2S LGBTQI+. And they offered, and others have as well, Transcare BC has some great educational resources that are available. If you haven't checked those out, really great places to start. And then Sarah offered a bit more here that will be in the full toolkit. And in fact, what we heard will be in there as well. So if you didn't participate before, you'll have a chance to really sit with some of the things we've even changed as a result of listening to all of you. That's really important. So that gender diversity involves going beyond a binary gender paradigm, which colonialism brought in, and accounting for our trans, non-binary, two-spirit relatives, and understanding that a diversity of terms may be used to describe gender identity today. Some of those might be specific to your language or nation. So there might be some culturally specific gender expressions beyond the gender binary. For others, there are new terms being created in English or even in the Indigenous languages to reflect the current lived realities of our gender diverse relatives. Similarly, consideration of sexual diversity involves the recognition of a diversity of sexualities beyond heterosexuality in order to account for lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, two-spirit people and their partners and families. This may include people who identify within the gender binary, men or women, and as 2S LGBTQ, or who identify as gender diverse and 2S LGBTQ. Understanding these distinctions is important in Indigenous GBA plus frameworks in order to address the structural and practical measures needed in accounting for both gender and sexual diversity And we even heard last week at the engagement that the GBA Plus course that's offered for researchers does not work for and does not address the gender and sexual diversity needed and understood. Do you want me to, do you want to go back over to you now, Chastity, or do you want me to kind of?
Sure. Thank you so much, Natalie, for going over that. I think it's important to just state, centering wellness, talking about some of the pieces in regards, some of the gaps, I guess you could call it, or some of the misses, some of the just like blind spots of what gender-based analysis plus from a colonial perspective, from a federal government and provincial government perspective, and some of those pieces that we've woven in and taken the time to weave into this process. So this is the WAGE, the Women and Gender Equality Canada's definition of what is gender-based analysis plus, and you'll see that it even in the name, centering gender without looking at other aspects of our identity. So I'll read it out, and this is sort of the practice of gender-based analysis plus that not only has been adopted federally and across some of the provinces in Canada, but also globally. The practice of gender-based analysis plus is an analytical process used to assess how diverse groups of women, men, and non-binary peoples may experience policies, programs, and initiatives. The plus in GBA plus acknowledges that GBA goes beyond biological and sociocultural differences. We all have multiple identity factors that intersect to make us who we are. GBA also considers many other identity factors like race, ethnicity, religion, age, and mental or physical disability. So that is the starting point of where gender-based analysis plus is starting from in Canada. And there's many gaps, some that we've spoken to already, but just wanting to highlight some of the other gaps that Natalie and I continue to notice as we're on this journey to make it more relevant to First Nations people here in British Columbia. So the existing models of GBA Plus do not account for the ongoing and daily experiences of violence for colonialism and intersecting acts of systemic violence, nor for sovereignty and historic ongoing resistance, activism, and survivance by Indigenous peoples. The majority of existing GBA Plus resources do not center First Nations ways of being and knowing, values, and worldviews, and instead reinforce colonial ways of knowing. Given the breadth of knowledge and experience of 2S LGBTQIA+ peoples, as well as the histories, traditional teachings, and ways of knowing that gender diverse and two-spirited individuals represent, GBA Plus's additive model, where a list of factors are added to gender, is inadequate. And that is a quote from the NWAC literature review that they did on gender-based analysis plus in 2021, which is a really great read if you have time, and it's, I think, in our resource section as well. So that's sort of where the mainstream gender-based analysis plus is starting from. So Natalie and I started on this journey back a number of years ago, where we were contracted by the Ministers' Advisory Council on Indigenous Women. And I think Patricia Barkaskis is here, who is a member of that council still. So hello, Patricia. And they had contracted us to develop an Indigenous gender-based analysis plus toolkit. So part of that process, we hosted a 2-day workshop, and our objective of that 2-day workshop was to bring folks together to have some dialogue about gender-based analysis plus, but also to come up with a definition. Because when we did an environmental scan across globally and domestically, there wasn't a definition of a specific gender-based analysis that spoke to Indigenous folks. So during this 2 days, we talked a lot about definition. And so you'll see the word map here, that all of these words were shared. You'll see women, voices, Indigenous, safety, programs, lived impacts, outcomes, celebrating identity, equitable, like just some really keywords, wellness, building bridges, identities, mindfulness. So just like other words that resonated beyond sort of that technical language that we had shared here at the front. And so that was sort of the word map that we came up with for the Indigenous Gender-Based Analysis Plus. And that toolkit is available online on the Ministers Advisory Council on Indigenous Women's website. So if you Google Indigenous Gender-Based Analysis Plus British Columbia, I think it comes up because that's sort of how I'm searching it. But we'll make sure that you have the link to that because that work that we did is really important, is being used across the provincial government. As I know, there's several sessions, and the Ministers Advisory Council on Indigenous Women are also ensuring that it's implemented across the government and being able to bring that work forward. So just wanting to share that that's the part of a journey that Natalie and I were on for over a year. And then the BCAFN contacted us to, as they found out that we did that work, they heard about it, and they wanted us to create a First Nations specific toolkit here in British Columbia. So I'm going to hand it over to Rochelle King, who is a policy analyst at BCAFN, and she has been an amazing partner to work with. She's been very engaged in the process and came up to the Tŝilhqot'in territory a number of times to take part in and witness the Tŝilhqot'in pilot. So Rochelle, I'll just hand it over to you. There's 2 slides here to just talk about how BCAFN has come to this work.
Yeah, thank you, Chastity. So to begin, BCAFN started working towards enhancing and supporting our organization's ability to take a more inclusive and equity approach to advocacy in 2020. The purpose of our work was to uplift and include all voices such as TOS LGBTQIA+, peoples, women, people of various ages, people who live in rural and urban settings, and all dimensions of our diversity of First Nation peoples. We aimed at continuing to build on GBA+ work by learning from and modeling what work has been done by other organizations and like-minded entities. BCAFN is pushing to create tools for a broader context, highlighting unique perspectives, as well as building on existing resources, right? So it's not one and done. We think that the field is growing as it should. And yeah, so to continue on, in March 2022, we brought forward Resolution 01/2022, intersectional advocacy and capacity building grounded in First Nations knowledges for consideration by First Nation chiefs in BC. The proposal also included BCAFN to pull together a toolkit, which is what we're discussing today, that would center and uphold the diverse ways that First Nations in BC bring in and uplift the voices of community members that is expressed through their languages, their laws, worldviews, as well as their teachings. So we did partner, as Chastity mentioned, we partnered with Chastity and Dr. Natalie Clark, who's also on the call, and Dr. Sarah Hunt, who were already uplifting Indigenous voices within the GBA+ initiatives in the field of work. They began their work for BCAFN by hosting and facilitating engagement sessions that Chastity mentioned with BC First Nation community members from May to June 2023, and like to gather traditional knowledge on gender diversity, inclusion, and connection from BC First Nations. The knowledge shared through the engagement is, it is honored and uplifted within the toolkit that is titled All My Relations, a Culturally Relevant Approach to First Nations Gender-Based Analysis. which also speaks to the importance of bringing back our traditional First Nation ways of being and knowing about gender, diversity, inclusion, and connection within our community structures. So in May 2023, BCAFN started accepting expression of interest to work with ABC First Nation to implement First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus and to pilot the draft toolkit. And the pilot project, First Nation would also be able to make recommendations towards the finalization of the toolkit and participate in the webinar. So really glad to have TNG Women's Council be a part of the webinar and to share their learnings with us all today. And also in July, so most recently, I guess, like in July 2023, we did begin our work with the Chastity Women Council, who began their pilot project on the toolkit, as they are seen as leaders across the province for the work they are doing as monarchs in their community. And I wanted to say thank you to the members of the TNG Women's Council for their participation and time put towards the pilot project, and to recognize their leadership and you know what they're doing for their community. So yeah. And before I move forward, I also want to thank Chastity and Dr. Natalie Clark and Dr. Sarah Hunt for the work they've done in the past and the present, and the work they may continue to do in the future for to uplift Indigenous voices within GBA Plus initiatives. And yeah, also finally want to acknowledge the financial support of the Women and Gender Inequity Canada for their development of this toolkit. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Rochelle. Appreciate you going through that process. I think it's important just that folks know that BCAFN's commitment and the process that they've gone through officially to acknowledge that this work is really important and to seek out the funding to further create this work, and to also just give an overview of the creation of the toolkit as well, which started back in May with the engagement sessions a couple months before that, just to get organized and things like that, but officially going out in May with those sessions. So thank you so much, Rochelle, for your continued support on this project, for making sure that it continues to stay an important part of BCAFN, and thank you for your advocacy. So thanks again. Maybe I'll hand it over to Natalie to speak to the approach to this work and the next couple of slides.
Yeah. If we think back to the work we did, maybe first with the Minister Advisory Council, maybe that was a gestation, and now we've moved into a new process. And I sort of feel with this like I did when they handed me my daughter at the hospital to take home. I was like, what? That's it? I don't even know how to put a car seat in yet. So just acknowledging this work, you know, has so much love and care, but there's still so much to do, and really gratitude for everyone that's here, because we need everyone to continue this in this work. So this was a co-creation process, and like putting anything to writing, there's things we'd always change, and Chastity and I are like, oh, right, this is done for now. So, you know, I would say any mistakes are our own, because this work is going to continue to, you know, they were made in love with love and offered from the work that co-created the knowledge. And each session we've had, I learned something. I take a whole bunch of notes and I think, oh, okay, I'm learning that. One of the themes was, you know, everything is ceremony. And we really did try to have each session, just like today, open in a good way with prayer and song. We've had youth present. I was a couple of the youth who joined and witnessed some of the other sessions, spoken the language. So just, and wellness supports. Really important to build that into any process you have going forward. And we did what we heard, as we already talked about, but also that will be reflected, those themes in the toolkit when you get it. So that's, and I can talk about the next slide. Sometimes when one of your day jobs is academia, you get asked to do things like literature review, and anybody who knows me, I'm always like trying to decolonize everything or break up with those processes. So part of the work we did, Chastity and I, with the McEwen, we had a number of students who supported us, First Nations Indigenous students in that process. And again, this time I want to acknowledge Robbie Davis-Matthews, was part of the lit review with me, but also does some editing work with us. But anyways, just here's some pieces around that those literature reviews processes kept out the knowledges. And it often still centers colonial values of ways of being and knowing. And I see Jewel's on here, and Jewel knows that I recently was asked to do one, and instead I wrote a poem. So I think we're always decolonizing this. So I just want to say that we had 22 that will be available, and they really center the heartbeat, which means we cite our elders and knowledge keepers and youth first, rather than the colonial way where you might be citing the most recent information. And yeah, so those sacred numbers were a big part of that. And that each nation would go back, and you'll see when we go through the stages, you know, you're going to uplift what was there already, and those sacred matriarchs and other knowledge keepers who can guide us in this work. So just wanting to say that there's a heartbeat literature review. Okay.
Thanks so much, Natalie.
And there is a break that was built in. I'm sorry, I misspoke when I said that. I was looking at our agenda, but the original created by the oh so wise Rochelle. We do have a wellness break. I just wanted to acknowledge that to people.
Can I pop in? I'm sorry, I don't know if this is the format you're hoping for folks to jump in, but I just want to come back to the Heartbeat Lit review and just really highlight that for folks who maybe that's a new piece for us who are emerging into our own Indigenous identity as scholars or academics, or maybe that's a new concept for any of the non-Indigenous folks in this space. But Heartbeat Lit reviews is the fundamental space in how we're taking our stories from being stories at grandma's kitchen table to enacting it as law, and removing those differences between how we look at it from a different side of the table and start realizing we're caring for each other. I really have so much mad respect for both of the folks that are facilitating this. And Natalie, I just want to really highlight the Heartbeat Lit review as a piece I so deeply invite folks in this room to go and do some reflections on. You all have the ability to make impactful spaces with that work. Apologies for interrupting.
Ah, beautiful.
No need to apologize. Really appreciate you speaking to that, because I think it's important as we look at collectively moving forward together in this time and space, and, you know, really celebrating our strengths as Indigenous people. So appreciate you. Thank you. So that Heartbeat Literature Review will be a part of the toolkit as well. So it will be available for everyone to see as well. So just wanted to I know Natalie probably said that, but just wanting folks to know that you'll have access to that. So I just want to take a brief few minutes here to go through the overview of engagement sessions. And as we mentioned, we did do a what we heard already, but wanted to just make sure that we really talked about the process to creating this, that it wasn't just like Natalie and I and Dr. Sarah Hunt sitting in a room, like coming up with this on our own. We really wanted to hear from community, and this was an essential part to the process that BCAFN was supportive of and helped us co-host these events, some online, some in person. A couple of closed sessions with the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council and the Secwepemc Girls Group, as well as a dedicated session that was facilitated and adapted by Dr. Sarah Hunt for the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. And then we reported out what we heard on June 26th. So we just also want to take a moment as we move into speaking about the process, that some of the limitations of this project, as all projects have them, but just wanting to be very transparent about them, that you know, this is unique and important work, as we've stated, and it is really important work, as Natalie touched on, that, you know, policy has been and continues to be a site of harm for our people. And if this you know, all our relations, First Nations gender-based analysis work is speaking to policy and structural and systemic change that is well overdue to happen, and be more inclusive of our people. That, you know, we really take this to heart, that it hasn't just been something that we've, you know, showed up to, you know, part-time, that it's something that has been with us, our hearts, minds, and spirits, for over a year. And last week, we had the opportunity to travel, I traveled to Newfoundland to speak to the AFN Women's Council and 2S Plus Council, and one of the Grand Chiefs in Canada. Her final comment after sitting through the presentation said, "This work is and will save lives." And I think that, you know, that's really important as we move forward here. However, there are some limitations that I want to highlight in you know, what they were. So the funding was limited. The timeline was too short. We feel like we could have probably had another year. And I said to Natalie, as you know, we're wrapping up the final pieces to hand over to Rochelle to submit to the funders and all of that. I'm like, we just have to have a hard stop, because there's all these things that like we can continue to write and develop. And so, you know, I know that Natalie and I are committed to continuing on with this work and whatever that looks like. We only had funding for one pilot. I think that, and that pilot was with the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council. I think that, which was wonderful. And I'm so excited to listen to them in about 25 minutes or so, or half an hour after our break. But would be wonderful to have more funding to do more pilots, so that we can learn more and unlearn more and hear more voices and weave in more voices, and knowledge and our values and our ways of being. So, you know, maybe, you know, Natalie and I will have some recommendations too about like what next, from our perspectives being involved. And then also each nation will need to adapt to the language, the laws of their nation, and also probably need some support around capacity, in regards to taking this forward. So I just want to say that up front. So through the community engagement sessions and literature review, we were able to design the first draft, and of the toolkit, and also come up with a more culturally relevant definition, as we felt that the definitions that we talked about earlier had highly technical and colonial language and jargon that doesn't necessarily resonate with our First Nation communities. So this was really about co-creating a definition that is more culturally appropriate. The theme of transformation came up in every single regional engagement session we had, in every discussion like that Natalie and I would have like with our colleagues and community members and friends, that this theme of transformation kept coming up. And so we wove that through the toolkit, and we really see the First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus process is created as a way to reclaim and restore the All My Relations knowledge system that was employed by the majority of First Nation communities since time immemorial. During the community engagement process, the theme of transformation recurred through each session. Therefore, the analogy of the 5 stages of the life cycle of the butterfly was used as an example and representation of the transformation in nature. And it's being employed in this toolkit as a metaphor of nature as our teacher. And it also functions to share the steps of transformation that can be achieved by applying the FNGBA Plus lens to your community structures and systems. We really want to stress that this isn't anything new, that the theme of transformation, the theme of inclusion and belonging has been a part of many of our First Nation knowledge systems since time immemorial. However, it is resurfacing, and this resurgence through FNGBA Plus is centering First Nation ways of being and knowing. This toolkit is one way we are reclaiming our knowledge systems and structures to address generations of enforcement of the destructive colonial systems and structures, to capture and embody the reoccurring and effervescent theme of transformation. And we share the steps applying FNGBA Plus through the 5-stage transformative life cycle of the butterfly. and is also a huge statement of us resisting the colonial framework and the colonial ways of being and knowing. So this work we are undertaking resists the colonial linear framing and instead centers each nation's values, laws, and ceremonies. First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus, or First Nations intersectionality, not only recognizes the multi-generational impact of colonization and violence, but points towards policy solutions that acknowledge sovereignty, build on resistance, and emerge from the strengths within the community and the voices and wisdom of all our relations. So when we did the community engagement sessions, one of the questions that we asked was, what other words resonate with you when you're thinking about First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus? And so we heard lots of things, but we took a sampling just to share here briefly, like rematriation, traditional wellness, inclusion, all my relations, we are all one. Inclusion of all peoples in decision-making processes and governance policies and programs. So we heard this reoccurring theme of all my relations. We are all one. Everybody had a role and belonged in our communities. And so that's why we are calling it All My Relations, a culturally relevant approach to First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus. I love word maps. I don't know if other people do, but I love them. And so it was me who created the other one when we did the session. And then this is a heart-shaped word map from the community engagement sessions when we asked people about what other words resonate for you when you think about First Nation Gender-Based Analysis Plus. So you'll see words like traditional, genders, teachings, matriarchs, generational, diversity. There's also some language, like traditional language words from people's nations in there as well. Rematriation, relations, medicines. So just,
Love. I see
yeah,
the word love.
yeah, like so many beautiful family, healing, bundles, leadership. So just some really beautiful and uplifting work and words. The theme, also or I should say the formula, I guess, if you want to look at it that way, that we wove into and were guided by was reaching back, where are we now and where are we going? And so instead of starting to build the First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus toolkit from a deficit base, which looks at minorities or subsections of the population that don't fit the mainstream definitions as a deficit. We actually don't see it that way. We see that our diversity is part of our strength. And so we started building the toolkit from a strengths-based, and then also reminding and reawakening this work in our First Nations communities. So we started with reaching back. So, thinking about prior to Contact in Canada becoming a country, how did your community include and weave in diversity of Indigenous grandmothers, women, girls, two-spirit, gender diverse peoples living with disabilities and voices in decision-making and governance? And then where are we now? Like, where are these examples alive and well in our communities, and of pulling our traditions forward, and how can we continue to learn from them, expand them, scale them? And then dreaming and visioning, that was such a part of our Indigenous ways of being and knowing, and still is, having the dreamers and the visionaries and our medicine people. And in the Tŝilhqot'in language, they say DN, they're DNs, visioning and dreaming about where we're going. And so that is also what we wove in, is how would you like to see the inclusion of Indigenous women, girls, grandmothers, two-spirit, gender diverse, urban, rural, grassroots people living with disabilities, and other diverse voices, knowledge, and wisdom carried forward in the future. And so you'll see this sort of quote unquote formula of reaching back, where are we now and where are we going, woven throughout not only the community engagement process, but also in the 5 stages of the butterfly, the pilot, like the toolkit, everywhere. So that's sort of been our guiding principles. So I'll hand it back over to Natalie to talk about the 2S plus engagement session themes that Dr. Sarah was able to bring forward.
Yeah, so I was privileged to be witness, as well as a couple of the youth I work with were part of this session. So I'm going to just read Sarah's words because they're not here, and I really think that's important for me in my active allyship here. The one thing that Sarah did do differently, and I think this is really important, is that sometimes in the reaching back, that some of those teachings may not be as present or known. So, you know, Sarah started with where are we now? And really asking where do people feel safe and included? And then went to the question of reaching back and then reaching forward, especially picking one priority to strengthen the voices of Indigenous 2S, LGBTQIA+, and gender diverse people in your community. What would it be? Okay, so those were, my goodness, an ambulance just went by. I live way up a mountain on a dirt road. That was weird. So one of the things that Sarah Hunt said in her analysis as well, and this will be available in the toolkit, just again, acknowledging that colonization has involved the imposition of homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of systemic discrimination against gender and sexually diverse members of our communities. Intersectional approaches to Indigenous GBA+ must address the roots of these forms of discrimination along with racism and sexism, which is why the critique of GBA+. In particular, communities have an opportunity to create policies and programs which embrace and celebrate, I'll pause there, embrace and celebrate Indigenous 2S, LGBTQI+ children and youth in all aspects of their lives, at home, at school, and in cultural and decision-making spaces. This will necessarily involve educating leaders and frontline staff in all areas of community life to ensure broad support for education about sexual and gender diversity based in acceptance and respect for all. Another theme that Sarah pointed out, and we felt was important because they're not here to share, that due to the internalization of some of the colonial teachings about sexuality, particularly through religion and the residential schools, it's anticipated that some people will resist these measures. Therefore, it's essential that community leaders demonstrate a clear commitment to undoing the historical, structural, and systemic harm colonization has imposed on Indigenous 2S, LGBTQI+ peoples and relatives. And Sarah, also in that session, it came up that we should look to teachings such as All Our Relations or other culturally specific teachings about including, embracing all members of our families and communities and creating broad support. And I think that's really important. And even at our session last week, that Chastity was at the AFN, some of the 2S reps said we shouldn't have to leave to urban centers to feel safe. And so really making sure that this is in our communities and rural spaces came up a lot. And I encourage people to read the full report and analysis by Sarah when that's available. And the last one I think here, I believe maybe there's a couple, just again, the importance of representation at decision-making tables is essential to reflecting gender and sexual diversity in Indigenous laws, policies, and programming across all aspects of life. Indigenous GBA+ frameworks must ensure this lens of sexual and gender diversity is central to considerations of power and governance, both structurally and in the everyday functioning of our communities, rather than being an add-on or an optional component, which is the critique. Gender and sexual diversity must be considered essential to ensuring GBA+ frameworks do not reproduce systemic homophobia and transphobia. And then we actually, I don't think, had a chance to say that at each of our sessions, we had Elena Starrett, an amazing Indigenous graphic artist and youth herself. I really, in lots of ways, they created a graphic recording and witnessed all of these sessions. And this was the beautiful one they created from the First Nations 2S LGBTQIA+ one. So just let you take that in, really beautiful. Safe houses were some of the recommendations. The real need for on-the-ground supports on and off reserve. Education at a young age so that there's safety, you're never too young to learn, equity and inclusion. Anyways, really beautiful. And nothing about us without us. As well, I see that actually, my sister, Bonnie, is on here as well. And one of the things that I've been doing for a long time is a Tŝilhqot'in. Sometimes we say girls group with RRLZ, but really we renamed it about a year ago, and such a synchronicity to be in the language, the word for butterfly, just to acknowledge their transformation and how they may choose to show up or identify in terms of gender or sexual identity. So this is actually, when I asked them, how would you name this? And there were a lot of words. They love to do stuff through art. This is the art piece they made to say what this means to them. So they love doing art. So just want to recognize in engaging our youth and having processes for our youth to be present in leadership is really important. Some of the recommendations from the youth, I just want to highlight. They spoke about stuff that weren't in any other sessions. And I think that's the importance of listening to our youth. They talked about the importance of access to sexual health options, better mental health access. They talked about support for sexual abuse and sexual assault survivors, violence, drugs, drinking. And they were the only groups in all engagements to talk about the climate crisis. I know it's there, but in terms of their worries or vision for the future. They talked about the need for youth spaces, and they really wanted to organize locally and globally using technology, which they are so much better at than us. This was a quote from one. I'd love there to be a digital space created where everyone could communicate about global issues for rural communities, girls group style, report to larger groups, and get things rolling. So anyways, just acknowledging their words as well. I think that's it for that. And this was the beautiful one made from the youth group session in Chase, but also the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council. The theme of the butterfly came up there as well. And so Elena combined those two, and it's just really beautiful. I'm wearing a butterfly dress. I have butterfly earrings. I have a picture behind. I'm like infusing this in the good medicine of transformation. So I just love that feeling like I can be myself. Okay, I think we're almost there, and then we'll have a break. Do you want me to keep going with this just to flow into the Chastity? Do you want me to, are you good to take these ones up? I think we'll skip over these.
Yeah, I can take it from here. So the themes from the overall engagement sessions was, as Natalie had already mentioned, that everything is ceremony. All my relations kept coming up. Go into spirit, listen, and remember. So this isn't new to us. This is something that inclusion and belonging is something that, in many of our Indigenous communities that we've woven in since time immemorial. This is about reclaiming traditional roles, honoring diversity in genders and sexuality. Also looking at protection of lands, water, families, languages, culture, ways of being and knowing. So it's like, again, addressing policy as a site of harm. So protection of all of us as peoples and our relatives. Safety for all peoples, inclusive of all genders and sexual diversity. And then again, just looking at that transformation piece. And so these are the questions that we asked that we went over already. So just reaching back, prior to Canada, like, what were your ways of being inclusive in your communities? And so just quickly showing the graphic facilitation of Elena Starrett and some of the things that we've heard. So matriarchal leadership, celebrating our differences, and that our differences have place in our communities, looking at the healing through ceremony and creating safe spaces, and having this process be grounded in the First Nation ways of being and knowing, having a healing-centered approaches, and safe spaces kept coming up. And Natalie and I really, when we were with the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council, they'll also speak to how they created a safe space and in their communities for their 3-day gathering as well. And then the second question was just where examples of spaces and places and processes that the diversity of our peoples is included, respected, witnessed, not and sought out and utilized. And so again, just looking at the graphic facilitation of this. So just, believing in love and truth and lifting up community and we are the first peoples, and this is our responsibility, is lifting up our community, creating a bridge of understanding, and ensuring women and to us LGBTQI+ can be loud and proud. And again, the theme of going into spirit, listening, and remember the importance of our ceremonies. There was also a beautiful Statlium story that was shared about transformation, about going into spirit, listening, and remembering as well. when we asked that question. And the third question is just, again, dreaming, visioning, looking forward. How do we want to see this moving forward? So again, the needs of women being addressed, strength, courage, and innovation, seeking collective healing and a coming together, needing culture and traditions, believing that we're all born with gifts and talents, and sharing those gifts and talents is fundamental. When we listen, we learn, talking about some of our ceremonies and celebrating our people, and reconnecting to our people and our land and our culture, and decolonizing our communities as well. And Natalie always says nothing about us without us. So just really making sure that that philosophy of nothing about us without us is brought forward through applying the lens of FNGBA plus. So as we mentioned, we wove in what we heard through those regional engagement sessions to create the first draft of this toolkit. Again, the theme of transformation was heard at each engagement session and throughout our research for the annotated bibliography as well. And so we've created the toolkit to reflect a 5-stage process. So the 5 stages of the butterfly life cycle. So you'll see that analogy and metaphor woven in: the egg, caterpillar, chrysalis, the butterfly, and then the butterfly after taking flight. So stage 1 is sort of, if you were to take this toolkit as a community member, as, somebody who works for a First Nations organization and wanted to start looking at how do we apply this. And so this is the grounding, preparation, information identification, and planning stage. So this stage includes exploring, learning, and unlearning together, and includes getting familiar with the toolkit, which reinforces the importance of reclaiming and restoring the community's ancient and important knowledge systems. This is done through an exploration of reaching back traditional knowledge systems in the community. And so that toolkit will actually go through how you would plan out like a stage 1 in your community, with some key principles, some suggested steps, and as we mentioned at the beginning, it will need to be adapted to your community or your organization's needs, but definitely some key principles, some suggested steps on where to start, and all of those things as well. Stage 2 is the caterpillar, so the development and design of the community process. This phase is the process that can be used to define the objectives of what the community would like to learn or unlearn from the community engagement sessions. The planning stage will determine the best way to host and facilitate inclusive community-informed dialogue sessions that will help collect insightful information from community members. It will be important to determine the requirements to foster and create a safe, inclusive space that embodies the concept of all my relations. And so this is really where the FNGBA plus lead and committee come together and look at developing and designing that community process. Are they gatherings? Are they ceremonies? Are they art-based, land-based gatherings where we're going to discuss a certain theme that we want to apply the First Nations gender-based analysis plus to? Is it a policy? Is it a program? Is it a theme, a situation that you would like to apply that to? And the Tŝilhqot'in's Women Council is going to speak to the theme of safety that they picked in their process right after the break. And so they're going to speak to how they came together and planned their pilot and their engagement session. They met several times to come together to finally pick the theme of safety, and they framed it through a health and wellness approach. Stage 3 of the toolkit process is the chrysalis process. And this is actually where those community gatherings, the community dialogue, the information gathering, and the research happens. So at this stage, the community gatherings and dialogues take place. We continually learn how important it is to co-create safe, inclusive spaces when we are engaged in the community engagement sessions to create this toolkit. The questions are structured in such a way to be productive, positive, and uplifting. So really, we're asking or suggesting that the formula is reaching back, where are we now and where are we going? So really offering that formula for applying to your community gathering and community dialogue sessions. Also, when you're looking at research and information gathering in the communities. So these conversations can bring intergenerational trauma and lived experience to the surface. Therefore, it is paramount to have community and culturally relevant systems of support woven into the design of the gatherings. And that's specifically what the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council did, was to frame their theme of safety through health and wellness. And so we had the privilege and opportunity to have Elena Starrett, who was with us for the regional engagement sessions, to come with us and be at the 3-day gathering for the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council. And so this is some of her work that she captured. So the first day was reaching back. Second day is where we are now, and we looked at the youth portion. And discussed a number of other things about education, which the Women's Council will speak to as well. And then the third day was about dreaming and visioning and moving forward. And the Women's Council will also speak to that as well. But they had some wonderful discussion about, what would we like to see in regards to inclusion and bringing this work forward. The stage 4 of the toolkit process is the butterfly taking flight. So data analysis, report out, and implementation. And so this is a really, stage 4 and 5 is really important about that transformation. So now that we've come together, we've identified the places and spaces that we want to apply a First Nations gender-based analysis plus lens. Then it's really about, collecting that information in community, and then what's the best way to bring that forward. So this is where an analysis of the information shared at the community gathering occurs. This phase includes organizing information into overall themes, reaching back, where are we now, and reaching forward, as well as identifying themes and priority areas that emerge during the conversations. So once this has been established, it will be important for the community to report back a summary of knowledge using a variety of methods. So really, who are you reporting back to? How do you bring forward the themes and the recommendations to your community? And the Tŝilhqot'in's Women Council will also speak to that. They brought that forward to their Council of Chiefs and had a follow-up letter, and they're working to continue to bring those recommendations forward, which they'll speak to. And finally, the final stage is the butterfly after flight. And this is where the transformative change happens in the systems and structures within our communities and within our First Nation organizations. It can be where evaluation takes place, and also knowledge sharing. So how do we share about our transformative processes? How do we share about how change, systemic change happens? Because that's how we inspire each other to continue on with this work. So this is the last stage in reapplying the First Nations Gender-Based Analysis Plus and all my relations knowledge systems and community, and could include the following steps. Each community will define and determine how they will integrate the information into their communities. And so, this is where the policy changes happen. This is where the conversation continues, beyond you going out and doing your community gatherings, but ensuring that inclusive conversations are happening within the community. And so the Women's Council is ensuring, the Tŝilhqot'in Women's Council through their pilot is ensuring that this work continues to happen throughout all of their communities beyond the pilot. Other aspects of the toolkit that will be included beyond the 5 stages is naming and language definition of FNGBA plus, with including some of the nation's languages, an overview of the pilot, as we spoke to, the annotated bibliography and literature review, the sacred questions, which is the formula of reaching back, where are we now and where do we want to be. They'll be also talking to approach and witnessing and the importance of that, and also talking to why this work is important to reclamation, sovereignty, recentering our ways of being and knowing, and pulling our knowledge and traditions forward. So we're looking at finalizing this toolkit by March 31, which is this Easter Sunday. And so we're looking at having that finalized and integrating in the learning from the pilot and the wisdom from the field. And today we're hosting the webinar, which is part of our deliverables as well. So you'll continue to see how BCAFN pulls this forward beyond March 31st. This is our contact information for Natalie and myself if you're interested in reaching out specifically to us about this work. But this toolkit will live with the BCAFN as it will belong to them. And communities will have access to it. So you'll be able to hopefully, as we said, apply it and bring it forward into your work. So I'm 6 minutes over our wellness session. So I just want to ask Natalie if she wants to have some final comments, because after we come back from the break, we're going to pass it over to the Chastity Women's Council to speak about a more in-depth process of the pilot that they embarked on and are looking at continuing the work of beyond March 31. So I'll hand it over to.
Yeah, no, I think you're going to need to drink some water. I was thinking we should have switched the slides there to give you a break. I'm going to post this in the chat that we're going to take our 10-minute break, and please get some water and stuff when we come back. We're just going to have so much love and beauty to offer in our listening to the Women's Council. And then after that, a question period, but we are asking the questions just be in the chat, and we might not get to all of them, but like we always say, once we're in the circle, we're in the circle to kind of be able to answer questions even afterwards. So hopefully we'll get to some of those. So I'll post that now, but I guess it is, what time is it? So if we took 10 minutes, just maybe we should say, just come back at 2:30. Is that, it's a little bit more than 10 minutes? Yeah, it's just easier to remember. So you'll get a little more than 10 minutes. So we'll come back at 2:30 and just be really honored to listen and center the words of the pilot and to hear from them. So really excited for that.